place over around Dodds Avenue up there in Chattanooga. He'd get those newspapers and he'd take his fingers and he'd roll them up this way and get them nice and tight, and he'd tie them with a string and then put them in the top of that ice cream cart. Go over there to the paper mill and they'd weigh him and come back out of that paper mill, and he'd come up there and weigh empty, and they'd give him a little sack of money. Herby come by, usually it'd be on a Thursday. Every now and then I'd be up there. You could hear him come in, man. He'd come in down there. You could hear him clopping. He sounded like a Clydesdale coming down the hall, man. I mean, he didn't have any control of things. His big old feet just hitting that ground, boy, like a Clydesdale walking on asphalt coming across there. And he'd walk into that secretary and he'd say, "Well, where's the preacher? Want to see the preacher?" And then they had a button thing. They could hit the little button, had the little red and black wire run across the top of the hallway down there through. It was fancy, you know, back in those days. And down in there, and he hit the button there, and he said, "I heard him, send him back," you know. And he came down there, and he called the secretary down there and a couple of people, and Herby said, "Preacher, I need to know how much you my tithe." He said, "Herby, listen, your mama is an invalid laying at home. Your sister has to work all the time. You get a little governmental assistance. You don't ever see your daddy anymore. He's not around, and none of your other kinfolk. The Lord understands you. Probably don't have $100. He said, "I want to know what my tithe is, preacher." He said, "Well, you got $110 is one time that I remembered." And you said, "That'd be $11, Herby. That'd be $11. "Preacher, I want to give an offering." I'm not after your money. I'm just telling you somebody that did what they could.
Yes, sir.
A broken vessel.
Yeah.
Twisted up like a pretzel. Never had the chance that I had. Didn't have good raising like I had. Didn't have opportunities like I had.
Yes, sir.
Every time those doors were open on the second row, Herby's sitting right over there.
Amen.
My dad had George Beverly Shea in and Cliff Barrows way back in the day in that church. And he come over there, and the preacher comes, one of the fellows comes in there and says, "Preacher, we're stacked in there like cordwood. They're all along the walls. They're all up in the balcony, man. They're hanging out of the windows. I mean, they're up the aisles. They're all over the creation." He said, "If we could get Herby to move," and my dad said, "You ain't moving Herby nowhere. That's his seat, and he can sit there, and they can either sit by him or they can get over." "Well, preacher, we could probably put another 10 people over there," because he didn't smell real good, had a big circle around him. He said, "You better not lay a hand on him." "Well, okay, preacher." I remember walking out of there as a little kid, and that big old tenor got up there to sing. I didn't know who the guy was, you know. "Oh, David, how are you?" You know, "Hey, how you doing?" You know, I don't know who the guy is. He gets up there and sings, rattling the panes in the glass, boy, and that place about to come loose. And there's a big old group around Herby over there, big space around him. Nobody wanted to sit around him, boy. And he's over there glowing like a stoplight. Boy, it's like, man, this is the greatest thing in the world, man. I'm in here. It didn't bother him nobody liked him. It didn't bother him nobody didn't want him to be. He wasn't there for other people. People despised him, see, just like Mary. You see, when you want to do something for the Lord, there's always going to be naysayers, folks. There's always going to be, "Well, the way I think you ought to do it, the way I think you ought to be, and what I really think you should do, and what I think." No, stop that. The Bible said they had indignation. The other passage said great indignation. And they murmured against her. You say, for what? Worshiping Jesus. Amen. My goodness, man. Herby would sit over there. He'd get up and pick up a songbook like he could read. He couldn't read. He couldn't read cat, rat, dog. He couldn't read none of that. He never saw Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. He couldn't read his own name. He couldn't write. He'd pick up that songbook. Sometimes it'd be upside down. He'd pick it up. He sung every song in the same key, the same way, everything that he did. It didn't matter what it was, and none of the words made any sense, and every one of them was off key, flat as a board, man. And he would get up and sing, and people would be like, "Oh, they're rolling their eyes," and stuff like that. My dad would just grin and, "Sing, Herby, sing, Herby," like encouraging him just to irritate them hemorrhoids. And I mean, the people that were in there. Herby's smile looked like he had socks on his teeth. Daddy would take that envelope and put it in his shirt pocket. He couldn't wait for the offering plate. That big old bunch of deacons would come down there, and they'd come to the plate and look like a bunch of soldiers standing up there. You're at the tomb of the unknown soldier. So many people up there to pass them plates, and they get ready to give that thing. And Herby's sitting on go, man. I mean, he's just waiting. He's got his two fingers, his thumbs are turned in like this. He'd hold on them things just like this, and he'd just waiting, boy. And that plate would come by, and as soon as it come by, he'd go. And when he threw it in there, if it didn't pop, he'd grab the usher's hand and take it back out of there. And then he'd wait a minute, and then he'd pow. and make it pop. And when it popped, he'd turn around and look at everybody and grin. I'll never forget it, man. He'd go out the back door back there. One of the times I said he went to hug me. He didn't know his own strength, and he went to hug me one time, and he grabbed a hold of me. You know, it was all crippled up, and about broke my hand when he squeezed my hand. You know, and I love you. You the preacher boy. I love you. You know, like that. Hubby, love you. You know, and all that. I said, man, get off of me, man. You stink. The hand of Jesus came down and got a hold of me by the back of my belt, and I touched about every third step over there. When my dad got me in the room over to the side, took off that belt. I had heard that sound more than one time, that, you know, out of the thing. And you know what that meant? That didn't mean I was going to get a talking to. I wasn't going into timeout. He said, what was? I got a whipping because I picked on his friend. He said, boy, I wish I had 100 Herbies. If you ever talk to him like that again, I'm going to give you something that you will never forget. And he proceeded to give me something I haven't forgotten. And then he made me go out there and apologize to Mr. Herby. So I go out there and I'm standing there, tears running down my face, and I said, Mr. Herby, now I'm ashamed. Now I'm embarrassed. I got enough sense to realize I really messed up. And I said, Mr. Herby, I sure am sorry. And then Herby got crying, and he's like, so Herby told me, Herby didn't mean to hurt. And my daddy said, you didn't do nothing wrong, Herby. And he went over there and he hugged me. He said, I love you. It's all right. Don't let Herby hurt you no more. Okay, Herby? I'm thinking, oh, Lord, stop. I can't. It's worse than the whipping. Dad, take me back in and whip me again. Herby, get ready to go. Big old outside that big old foyer up there. You know where all the deacons would go out there in the old days, the Southern Baptist churches? You know, sometimes they out there, you know, that's one of those kind of things where the kids learn to play church watching the deacons. A couple of kids out there one day playing church, and their dad's out there and they're smoking cigarettes, and Dad comes out and says, what are you doing? He said, Daddy, we're playing church. What do you mean you're playing church? Well, Daddy, every time between Sunday school and church the deacons go out and smoke, we're playing church. I went out there one day and there was a deacon. He saw me coming and he pulled that, you know, kind of behind his thing there, and this smoke was boiling up over his head. I thought he was on fire, man. So I went in and ran in my daddy's office and said, Daddy, the deacon's on fire, the deacon's on fire, the deacon's. And he said, what? And he said, the deacon's on fire. I thought I heard him say, good, about time, you know, but I probably misinterpreted that. And he went running out there. He said, son, he's just smoking. Anyway, that big old thing was out there. That's just for whoever wants to wear the shoe if it fits. But anyway, just out there. You know, I mean, you know, there's a lot of difference in smoking and a little bit of pink between your cheek and your gum. But anyway, he's looking out there. And Herby go out there and he'd get right to the edge of that white railing. Big old white columns out there, man. He'd get right to the edge of that thing. And he'd turn around and he'd say, Herby, see you later, preacher. And my dad would say, it won't be long, Herby. You're going to be thumbs up. Herby turned around and say, thumbs up, preacher, thumbs up. Because he knew when he got to heaven, you know, they'd turn his thumbs in. I don't know what it'd be like to try to live a life with your thumbs turned in all the time, getting dressed and doing all that stuff. Well, years went by, and my dad went up there and found out he was in the hospital, and he'd lost one of his legs because of diabetes. And he's laying in there. He walked in, took my nephew with him, walked inside the hospital room there. And he said to him, he said, hey, Herby, he said, how are you doing? What have you been doing? He said, preacher, I've been doing my best to hop around on one leg and praise the Lord. Okay, well, Herby, how's things going? And how's going this and that and the other? And they talked for a little while. He said, Herby, I got to go now. And they got ready to go. And my dad went down, he said, about 25, 30 feet down the hallway there. And Herby screamed all of a sudden, called his name. And before he could get back in the room, he called him again. And my dad went running in there and he said, Herby, you can't do this. This is hospital. You can't be hollering like that. Come on now. You can't be. You know better than to do that. You forgot something, preacher. No, Herby, I've prayed for you. I don't know what else it is I can do for you. I don't really know much else I can do for you. Preacher, not going to be long for old Herby going to be thumbs up.
Yes.
You say, what was that? A broken vessel.
Sure.
Just somebody doing what they can.
Amen.
Just encouraging a preacher along the way.
Yes, sir.
Giving. You think that $10, $12, $15 every week move the needle on that big old church? Well, I didn't even make the dent in the budget. But boy, sure did make a dent in heaven.
Amen.
I come in one day, I'm talking about broken vessels, just giving you a few illustrations. I come in one day working the midnight shift and come and take a nap and taking all the junk off and getting ready to take a nap and stuff like that. And I turned on the TV there. You could, back in those days, you could at least get somewhat decent, you know, preaching in those days, a little bit of it anyhow. I turned that thing on, and I'd gotten in there, and I was getting ready to take a nap there, and I heard a guy in there talking, and I thought, man, I know that guy's voice from somewhere. I've heard that guy before. And I sat there and listened to him for just a little while, and I thought to myself, man, where have I heard that voice before? And I'm still getting all my stuff taken off and all that. And I remembered there was a guy over at my daddy's house sitting in the living room there, just bawling like a baby, man, and he was all twisted up like a pretzel, man. And he was in there talking to my dad, and he was worried about all kind of stuff like that. And I thought, I can't be that guy. What would that guy be doing? And I walked out there, and I looked. It's this guy standing in the pulpit. There are 1,000 people. I don't know how many, 3,000 people in that big old huge church, big orchestra, big choir up there. And he's up there, and he's trying to lead the singing. He looked like a seal out of water or something, man. I mean, he was flopping all along around the ground like you just caught a bass and threw him in the bottom.